the supervisor of the shop or whoever they appoint, sometimes they'll appoint somebody else, like they give the weekend brief.
Does that happen every weekend?
Just depends.
The Jason Riley King case out of California, that case of that former Marine from San Diego who is accused of driving drunk on the wrong side of the highway, causing a head-on collision, which resulted in the deaths of 2 individuals and injuring 3 others. We have a lot of questions about this case because it does provide a unique perspective on DUI kind of cases. Joining me right now, and I'm so happy to have him on, is criminal defense attorney David Pietro. David, good to have you back here on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this case. It's a little unique, no? I mean, the idea that this guy is charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Do you see that often in these kinds of drunk driving collisions?
I can tell you every year that goes by, the DUI laws only become stronger and not weaker, and that's every state. Conservative states, liberal states, they're all united against drinking and driving. California is particularly aggressive because they make you, when you receive your driver's license, acknowledge that if you kill somebody while intoxicated, you could be charged with murder. Florida has, where I am, has very stiff laws where there's minimum mandatory sentence of at least 4 years on a DUI manslaughter, but we don't have to the severity and the extreme that you would be charged with murder, which requires a much more of an intent level of a crime. I guess California can prove this intent by acknowledging when you get your driver's license that this could happen. So this is pretty interesting theories of law in the state of California, and very, very, very aggressive level of prosecution.
I get that, and I'm all for making the laws stricter, but from a legal perspective, the idea that you have to show that this man, Mr. King, showed a grave indifference to human life, that he knew what he was doing and he made that choice. Doesn't that kind of get a little murky when a guy is really intoxicated? How do they form that kind of understanding, that kind of intent to qualify here for second-degree murder? Isn't that kind of a gray area?
Yeah, Jesse, I think that's a really good point. If we had laws that said that if you drink any alcohol, you cannot drive, and then you drink and drive to the level where your normal faculties are impaired, and you end up killing somebody, I could see that. It's like taking a gun outside and spraying bullets all around. Maybe you don't mean to kill somebody, but if a bullet lands and hits and kills somebody, it's obviously the activity that you were doing was to the level of gross or indifference to human life. Where drinking and driving is different in a way is because it is not illegal to drink and drive. That is a perfectly legal act. It's to the extent you can't drive when your normal faculties are impaired. What does that mean, right? It's not like when you jump in the car, some people might feel that they're fine and they don't feel that they're inebriated to the point their normal faculties are impaired, and then they can't develop that requisite intent. Now, if the evidence was that he got so drunk he wanted to drive and kill somebody, he didn't care anymore, then I guess that could rise to the level of murder. But I think this is really stretching the murder doctrine way farther than I think common law allows it to go.
But you wouldn't be surprised if in the future, if anybody who is involved in a collision resulting in the death of another individual, if that person who caused that accident or was involved in that accident was drinking, even a little amount, is it kind of like one of those strict liability offenses? The fact that you had alcohol in your system, maybe you make it, it doesn't matter if you had 1 drink or 12 drinks, the fact that you were inebriated at any point or had some sort of alcohol in your system, that's enough to rise to a certain level. Do we want to be that kind of society where that's where it will be? Because I have to imagine that would deter more people from getting behind the wheel if they had a drink.
I think that's where we're going. There's a clash. I mean, you look at countries like Sweden, it's absolutely illegal to have any alcohol and drive. Brazil is the same case. I think that's probably where the United States is going, but unfortunately for us, is we're a society dependent on cars in most of the country. So most people, when they go out and socialize and they have alcohol, they drive as well. So that's really where it's going to be difficult in this country to change it. And I think that your point is it's legal to drink and drive, but then all of a sudden it goes from a legal act to murder. And where's that line? And it becomes strict liability at some point. But at what point does the person charged develop that requisite intent to commit a crime like murder? I mean, look, he's guilty of DUI manslaughter all day long, and he's going to go to prison. He's going to be punished, and it's going to be severe.
Yeah.
But to bring it to the level of murder is really pushing doctrines that really don't fall within our common law, I believe.
Well, I want to talk about that in a minute, but the idea is if people want to go out and drink, there's Uber, there's taxis, there's subways, there's buses, their friends. I mean, it's hard to feel more sympathetic for a person who wants to go out and have a good time versus these two individuals, Ann Lee Baldock and Madison Elizabeth Cornwall, who weren't drinking. They were UCSD medical students at the height of their education, their careers. They weren't doing anything wrong, and they got killed as a result of it. So that's the flip side of it. And I think if the country kind of moves a little bit towards making these laws stricter, it might save some lives. But David, you made a great point about this gross vehicular manslaughter. So the defense has really tried to say that this is not murder. This is gross vehicular manslaughter. Why is this at trial right now? Didn't King have the opportunity for a plea deal for a lesser offense? Why didn't he take that? He had two of them, I believe.
You might assume he did. He might not have. And in California, when you're charged with murder, you might have less of a chance of parole and whatnot. So it depends on what the negotiated terms were. There's no doubt that the plea offers, if there was offers, which I believe there would have been years and years in prison. But there must be a reason in California that murder, he couldn't accept it. It might have to do with his eligibility for parole and other levels of release down the road that maybe DUI manslaughter doesn't have those type of, has as a less, maybe less duration in prison overall. So there has to be a calculation of length in prison as to why he's going to trial, because he basically conceded to the jury guilt. If he was my client, I probably would have open pled the DUI manslaughter counts, and I would have let those go to the jury. I would have just said, we've already pled to those, we accept responsibility, but this is the one that the prosecutors are overcharging, and that's not right. And that would have been probably my angle if that was possible in California.
Let me just see if I understand. If he pled guilty to for example, if he had pled guilty to second-degree murder and DUI, and it might be, I think it's a sentence of 15 years to life plus 8 years, is it possible that if you plead guilty, and just so our viewers understand, can he not necessarily have gotten life? Would he have gotten somewhere in between? And does his chances better if he takes this to trial? Is that the way to look at it? That if you plead guilty, your sentence is more, you could be looking at some really significant jail time, where if you go to trial, you might have a chance to see less jail time? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of supposition on my part, but there's a particular reason why they cannot plead guilty to this murder charge. His criminal defense attorney said he's guilty of manslaughter. Manslaughter probably, as it relates to his release down the road, 10, 15, 20 years from now, it probably is prohibited, or there's more duration in prison under the murder charge. And I think that's where this whole case sticks. Otherwise, he's got the presumptive blood alcohol level to be impaired.
Right.
Clearly, he was driving on the wrong side, going, the wrong side of the road on the highway. The case is a slam dunker. It's not one that anyone can lose. You have very sympathetic people that were killed, innocent people that had no fault of their own, that had a great life ahead of them, that he destroyed. So really the question is there has to be a specific reason for the duration of the prison that they're trying to avoid down the road to give him a life maybe when he's in his 40s and 50s.
Yeah. So what is the defense's strategy here? What are we watching right now? We saw this is the third day of the trial. We expect continued coverage in about a few hours. What are we looking for the defense to do?
I think the defense is basically riding a line of, we're taking responsibility, but this is going too far, and our laws don't allow prosecutors to do things like this, and they have to prove it, and they're overstretching, and it's sort of unique case. I haven't seen one like this before, and it's going to be very interesting. From my vantage point, could be 50-50. Because the problem for the defendant is although he was a Marine and he has some sympathetic mitigating factors to his life, these juries are going to go back and say this person's dead and this person's dead. It's hard to go back. The question is, when the jury goes back, are they going to be emotional or are they going to be intellectually honest?
Yeah.
If they're emotional, he's going to get convicted of murder. If they're intellectually honest, he has a good chance of being found not guilty on murder.
That's it. That's what makes this case super unique. Again, I haven't seen many cases like it. That's why we're covering it here on the Law and Crime Network. David, I want you to stand by. I also want your thoughts about the William Woodward case. But what we want to do right now is continue playing some testimony from yesterday in this Jason Riley King case. Again, I want to play you the testimony of Chad Carazales. And when we're done with there, when we come back, David and I are going to talk about the William Woodward case out of Florida.